down my radio because I have a few comments about your show tonight. You have gone totally over the line tonight.
Way over the line.
You have gone over the line. I am disgusted with to hear that this woman is fornicating with who is the devil. It's not. If it's anything, it's a demon coming to her in the middle of the night.
But it's what she wants.
And I know this because of the perverted act that is done not only to women but to men. And God has revealed to me in the new revelation that now in the end times that demons will descend upon our women and men and in the night and do horrible things to them. And you are promoting this. How can you sit there and allow this to go on the airways of our nation? This is why I am totally against you. And you have gone too far tonight, and your programs have just gone over the edge.
I knew this would get to you. I knew it would get to you.
Now, wait a minute. This is just the anthem of the Satan in our society. Just like the fact that the courts in Hawaii have made homosexual marriage, they ruled that could be recognized and acceptable, is unacceptable. And we must stand together as Christians. And you have a serious conversation here. You just sit there with your little demonic devil voice, and you won't even listen to me.
You love it.
And the fact that you threatened to kill me, that doesn't matter either. Why don't you tell him how you told him that?
You love it.
When you threatened me,
you love it.
And off the air, you threatened me because I did not want to have you come to my house.
I would never threaten you.
You were threatening me.
I never threatened you.
To be against on your shoulders. I am a minister of the new revelation from the Lord. I am the one who receives the anointing of the new commandments. And you break all of them every night. You hear me? You are a fornicator and a destroyer, a murderer of America's morals. You are, and that woman, behold her in my sight. I would destroy her for what she is. She is a fornicator with demons. She is a perverter and a fornicator against the Lord. And your blasphemy has gone unchallenged and unchecked, and I'm here to clamp down on you. And say that I will no longer sit about this.
You're not going to say any more on my program.
I command you, I rebuke you, that you stop this.
Something's leaving me. I think you've done it.
From the Kingdom of Nine, you're hearing Dreamland with Art Bell. To participate in the program, call toll-free 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-8255. First-time callers, area code 702-727-1222. Or the wildcard line at 702-727-1295. This is the CBC Radio Network.
It absolutely is, and I want to repeat this announcement. It's really a big one. We have a new image of the Hale-Bopp comet. And I want to thank Paul again in Houston for getting it to me. Thank you, Paul. The image was obtained, so that you know, from Kit Peak using a Steward Observatory 90-inch telescope. A Loral 2K times 2K CCD was exposed for 30 seconds while the telescope tracked Hale-Bopp. It is a very serious image, and we want to give credit properly to Dave Harvey and Steward Observatory. This image is now on our bulletin board, and you can get to it by calling area code 702, if you have a computer now, 702-727-1709. 702-727-1709. If you have a computer, it's called Comet1.gif. Now, if you don't have a computer, it is, I can tell you because I sent it personally by computer to the publisher, who will have it in the next newsletter, along, I might add, with the image of the crystal skull, Max, and a photograph of my studio, the one from which I'm transmitting at this very moment. You can get the newsletter. It's $29.95 a year, and how you could possibly wait any longer, I don't know. Every month it gets bigger and better, and we're going to keep putting this kind of information into it. The number to order the newsletter right now, and you just please keep trying, 1-800-917-4278. 1-800-917-4278. It's called the Art Bell After Dark newsletter. And I think that would be certainly an appropriate title for it. Well, all right. Let me again mention to you UFO facts. Now, if you listen to this kind of material, and I know you do,
I bet he would. Actually, he's a very nice man.
Yes, he is.
So I just want to mention one other thing. It's got 300 photos in it.
Yes.
And it took us forever to put this thing together. 12 countries and a lot of film, and I think that people might enjoy looking at it. And if anybody has some strange ritual facts or ideas or anything that could help me in my quest for sort of a universal field theory of ritualism and mythology, they can send it care of Llewellyn. I answer all my letters, and I'd love to hear from people who are also involved in these kinds of things.
All right, and so they would send it in care of the publisher.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. All right, off we go to a land you mentioned, someplace in Louisiana. Hello there. You're on the air. Where are you calling from, actually?
I'm calling from Chalmette, Louisiana.
All right.
It's about two or 3 miles outside of New Orleans.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just first of all, let me say I really enjoy your program.
Thank you.
And I listen to you every Sunday night. Well, what station would pick you up in Laurel, Mississippi? Do you know offhand?
I don't even know where that is in Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
I have stations there, but I you know.
You do?
Yeah, I sure do, but I'm not familiar with exactly where that is. Is it anywhere near? Well, I can't go through the list.
Okay, that's okay.
You'll hear us.
That's okay, because I just wanted to let my son know because he wanted to tune in too.
I see.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, sir. Thank you. I guess no specific question.
Hey. Your voice is heard everywhere. If that's not magic, I don't know what is.
It is kind of magic, actually.
It is. It's magic. 100 years ago, they would have said it was unbelievable magic.
They'd have burned me with you.
Probably. I suspect we're kindred souls.
Probably. First-time caller line. You're on the air with Denny Sargent. Hi.
Hi. My name is Diane. I'm calling from Moraga, California.
Hey, Diane.
And my question is, Mr. Sargent, do you have any books or resources that you would recommend in addition to your own on this subject?
Absolutely. I am by no means the greatest author in the world. As I said in the beginning of my book, I stand on the shoulders of giants. I would recommend Iliad, who's written numerous books on mythology. I'm going to give you some authors. I would recommend Carl Jung, especially his real basic book that's for everybody called Man and His Symbols.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you...
That one's wonderful.
Exactly. and I recommend, of course, I'm losing my mind now. Joseph Campbell, and his video series is fabulous.
Okay.
And any of his works are fantastic.
Okay.
There's some other people like Eric Newman, who people are not too familiar with. He wrote a book called The Great Mother, which is a survey of goddesses throughout history, which is fantastic. And this is a relatively new field. It's kind of a mixing of psychology and anthropology and history. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to take it a step further into the field of ritual. It's relatively hard. I mean, global ritualism is my attempt, but it's not a particularly scholarly work. It's really for just average people. Most of it was off the top of my head, just from years and years of reading and research and traveling. There's not a lot of, for example, there's not a lot of footnotes, historical footnotes in my book.
All right, ma'am. There you go.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, good luck.
Now, let's talk for a second. You know, for some reason, Denny, I have a lot of witches that listen to me, and I don't mean just on this program, you would imagine that, but on my other as well. And I'm constantly getting faxes from them. Now, is not witchcraft full of every sort of ritualism? It's rich in ritualism,
Absolutely.
Is it not?
I've met a number of witches. I've been to a number of pagan and witchcraft circles in America and pagan circles in all different countries around the world. And what witchcraft is in spirit, it's a continuation of pre-Christian European paganism. Historically, there's not a lot of actual stuff that has been continually practiced. Most of it, what it is now, is a kind of revival of the faith of European paganism. But what you're finding is that a lot of witches and quote-unquote New Age people and a lot of people who are listening to your show, what they're doing is what I call eclectic ritualism. The whole second part of my book is called eclecticizing or eclectic ritual. And this is a movement that I'm seeing, and I think the witches personify that. Wicca or witchcraft personifies that really well. But I'm seeing it all through the spectrums of New Age, of Jungianism, of every kind of group that is looking for a kind of global vision of what is going on out there. I kind of coined the term eclectic ritualism, which is people sampling Tibetan Buddhism, people going like yourself to Thai temples and getting some kind of feeling or experience, people going to Hopi ceremonies, people having some Hopi sage in their house and using that ritual, maybe having Tibetan prayer flags, using those, maybe carrying a cross that their mother gave them. This is eclectic ritualism, and this, I think, to be honest with you, is the great unspoken movement that's sweeping through America right now. And I kind of put a label on it. In global ritualism, I kind of addressed it. And I don't really claim to be unique, but I guess I have a lot of friends and a lot of contacts in many different levels. I know witches. I know many different kinds of Christians. I know a lot of New Age people. I know a lot of psychics. I know a lot of academics. I know a lot of psychologists, and they're all really doing the same kinds of things.
I know. That's
and
what. As I said,
yoga classes are being held up in my Lutheran church.
As I said, that's what's bothering me more than anything else, Denny, is that so many of these people are seeing and saying so many similar things that individually you can dismiss them. Collectively, you do so at your own peril. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Denny Sargent. Hi.
Hi.
Turn your radio off. That's number one. Always turn your radio off. Tell us where you're calling from. Well, now he must have gone to turn his radio off.
Well, just as a quick note, do you know what I think the greatest religious movement is right now?
What?
The World Wide Web.
Oh,
I do.
Oh.
Because religion means, the root of religion is the Greek word religios, which means to relink.
All right. Having said that and not wanting to expand on it, caller, are you there? Hello, caller.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air, sir.
Okay, hi, this is Mike, Detroit Lake, Minnesota.
Which might help explain the government's policy of silence about UFOs, and that is the intrusion of cases along the United States and Canadian borders in October 1975. Now I have learned there were other similar UFO intrusions at missile sites as early as 1967, 8 years earlier. This weekend, I interviewed former Air Force First Lieutenant Robert Salas, who was about 80 feet underground inside the capsule of a missile launch control center on March 16, 1967 at Malmstrom Air Force Base. It was early morning when a security guard above ground called to report a large unidentified light. This is former First Lieutenant Robert Salas.
Oh, my.
About 5 to 15 minutes later, he called back, and this time he was very frightened, very agitated. Said there was a UFO hovering right outside the front gate. It was silent. It was glowing red, and it appeared to be saucer-shaped, although he said it was a bit hazy. It was just a bright red glow. He wanted to know what to do. He was frightened. I think I recall telling him to make sure the outer fence was secure with guards. But I couldn't think of anything else to do. I mean, I was kind of in shock myself that he would tell me this, and in the way he told it. Like I said, he was very frightened and agitated. About that time, he said that he had to go because one of the guards had been injured, and he hung up abruptly.
Was the implication that the object had somehow injured the guard?
Well, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Later on, I talked to him about it after I was relieved. but the guard had been injured in some way, either trying to approach the object or avoid the object. About that time, our missiles started shutting down. And when that happens, we get a lot of bells going off and lights on our panels. So.
And all the missiles were shutting down?
Well, my recollection was that most of our missiles shut down.
The implication was that there was some connection between this red UFO at the gate and an electronic and electromagnetic interruption with the missiles.
Yes, there was some. So this was very unusual. We reported it. We got maintenance crews to go out there, and while we were still down there, before we were relieved, we got another call from another flight, and this was Echo Flight, that the same thing had happened at their flight, and all of their missiles shut down. All 10 of their 10 missiles shut down.
Was this on the same day, March 16th, 1967?
Yes.
So you're saying that maybe at least 5 in your command and 10 in another, so for a total of at least 15 missiles went down?
Yes. And the Air Force has been on record, and I've got copies of what they have stated, that no UFO incident has ever had any impact on the national security of the United States.
And that is false?
That is false. Absolutely. And this was a statement made by the Air Force in 1969. This happened in 1967.
Well, why do you think they chose a policy of lying about it?
Well, that's a good question. And I think I can't answer it. I'd like to have the government answer it. I'd like to have the Air Force answer it. Why they're covering these incidents up, and because I think the public has a right to know.
Right.
They have a right to know that there are very strange and unexplained things that have happened involving UFOs, which are obviously not of this planet.
And the manufacturer of the missiles, did they go over them? And
yes.
And did they have any explanation for how this could have happened?
No. We've been able to contact 2 of the engineers, happened to have worked for Boeing at the time, that investigated this incident, and they both told us that they were never able to determine a cause, definitive cause. The Air Force considered this a very critical incident. I have one of the documents we received on their FOI request. I believe it was 15th Air Force Headquarters to Boeing, asking for assistance in doing an evaluation, and they said this was to use the words in the document, was a cause of grave concern to the Air Force. And I don't think they would use that terminology if they had any ideas as to how this could have happened.
And has the military of the United States accepted that as a benign warning, or has there been an effort to be at conflict with this presence?
Well, I have no way of knowing what the military is thinking about this. All I can say is our government has made an effort to get rid of nuclear weapons on a worldwide basis, and I salute them for that, and all the other countries that have cooperated in reducing the presence of nuclear weapons and nuclear testing. And I think that's a worthy effort that we have to continue.
Right. And you've come forward on this because another person had filed Freedom of Information Act request on this incident.
Right.
Came up with some information.
Right.
And now you would like to see if there are others who were there at Malmstrom in 1967.
Oh, yes. With regard to my flight, I know there were at least 3 guards upstairs and then other guards out in the field that saw UFOs. At the Echo flight, there were also guards and maintenance personnel that saw UFOs over the Echo flight launch facilities. And I have, to this date, been unable to locate any of those individuals. So if there's anybody out there that was present on March 16th, 1967, and saw these UFOs over any of these facilities
at Malmstrom Air Force
at
Base.
Malmstrom Air Force Base, I'd sure like to hear from them.
And how should they contact you?
They can write to me, Robert Salas, S-A-L-A-S, at P.O. Box 52721, Bellevue, B-E-L-L-E-V-U-E, Washington, 98015-2721.
Again, that's Robert Salas, Post Office Box 52721, Bellevue, Washington, 98015, or you can contact me, Linda Howe, at Post Office Box 300 in Jameson, Pennsylvania, zip code 18929, or call my fax number at area code 215-491-9842. That's 215-491-9842.
All right, Linda, that was a very major story.
I think so, too.
The Air Force, when they closed Blue Book, said UFOs never have been and are not now a threat to national security. Obviously, they lied.
Yes, and this is what is bothering this man who served underground in the missile silos. But, on the other hand, if the government of the United States and other governments were up against unknowns that had the ability to not only close down their missile systems, but as my own brother who was stationed at Malmstrom in 1975 told me, to selectively change targeting information on the tape of the missiles, and they had no way to stop this. I can understand being in the government's position and not wanting to go to the public and say we have something we can't control here.
Of course not.
On the other hand, whatever this intelligence is, it does not seem, at least at this point, to be operating with some kind, I do not think, of malevolent intent. In fact, this man himself said that in conversation with some other officers later on, that he had the impression that there was a distinct his other officers had the distinct impression that there was a message here from whatever this intelligence was, that we should not be playing around with nuclear warfare and missiles. That is speculation at this point, but nevertheless, he made the statement that we have changed radically
all right,
in the last
Linda,
15 years.
We're way out of time. I want you to stay on the line for a moment, all right?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to keep you on the line, and we'll be right back. The ability to shut down missiles, or in the case of a Russian story, to put them into a launch sequence. There certainly is a message there, all right. This is Dreamland. I'm Art Bell. There's more in a moment. Stay right there.
Only mattress to charity.
Why buy a mattress anywhere else?
Tonight, more people in the Northwest area will sleep on a new mattress from Sleep Country USA than from anywhere else. 20 stores, including Puyallup, across from South Hill Mall next to Top Foods. Call 1-800-99-SUNNY for the store nearest you.
New, fascinating, a metaphysical milestone. Just 3 ways to describe Big K, the Kundalini story. Big K is a fast-paced, intimate story that will capture your mind as you discover you too might have had Kundalini symptoms. Big K, the first Kundalini book about a woman's long-term experiences with the powerful evolutionary energy. Order Big K at your bookstore today or get Big K by phone. Call 1-800-461-1931. Big K, the Kundalini story. 1-800-461-1931.
Como News 1000. Get connected early with America in the Morning. Weekday mornings at 4, right before First Edition. America in the Morning on Como News 1000. Como News 1000 with Paul Harvey. The rest of the story at 8, noon, and on your way home. Paul Harvey on Como News 1000. Como News 1000 with a taste of something unique. Dreamland with Art Bell. Sunday nights from 7 till 10.
From the Kingdom of Nye, we continue with your calls on Dreamland with Art Bell. Call Art now toll-free at 1-800-618-8255. 1-800-618-TALK. First-time callers, area code 702-727-1222. 702-727-1222. Or the wildcard line at area code 702-727-1295. 727-1295 in the 702 area code. Now again, here's Art Bell.
Once again, here I am. My God, that's a big story. There's a man who was in a missile silo, and a UFO appeared and shut down our intercontinental ballistic missiles. That's a very serious story. I just spoke with that man during the break, thanks to Linda, who got me the number, and I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow night on Coast. So if you want to hear more about that incident, put a little bookmark by something or another to remind you to listen to Coast AM tomorrow night, beginning at 11 o'clock Pacific time, and we will interview that gentleman, or more accurately, re-interview him. We're about to go to Peter Davenport, who's got breaking. Well, it's as good as any other explanation you can come up with, and there are many.
And we know, Art, that there have been these stories since the 40s of silver discs with non-human beings being found in New Mexico and other places. And you got that. You've now had one correspondence that you have put out. You've gotten another. I don't know if you are going to distribute that publicly, but it comes down to the fact that somebody says that they have had pieces of artifacts from a crash, and in the letter it says Roswell. We don't know where. There's no specific coordinates.
All right, if I might, let me stop you and tell everybody the second letter, the one Linda is now referring to with regard to the Roswell pieces, is now on the Internet. It's under anonymous letters that you see first the photographs of the material, then the first letter, and now the second letter has been added to it as of this moment on my webpage.
Okay.
Linda, if you would, start out.
Yeah.
You've been a middle person for me, and I really want to thank you, because getting something like this is actually kind of a burden.
It is very difficult, Art, because you now are experiencing what for the last 16 years, trying to find anybody with very credible professional credentials who would be willing to look at physical tissue and samples in the unusual animal deaths was difficult, and now having to deal with artifacts that may have come from a craft from someplace else is also difficult, and we are still experiencing the same syndrome that these professionals ask for and must remain anonymous in order to protect their positions in their work.
All right. How much can you tell us about the scientist? He's well credentialed, who examined this possible wreckage.
Yes, and he is in a major Midwestern university. He has been helping me and several other investigators in several aspects of the phenomena for about 7 years. His work is extremely good, well done. And he has been looking at the alleged Roswell UFO crash artifacts that you received last month.
All right, can you, before we get to that, tell us what kind of tests were done on the material?
Yes. You gave him 10 pieces, and the 10 pieces broke down into 5 small, what turn out to be, this is very interesting, they are perfect squares. They've been measured, and they are exactly 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters square and less than 1 millimeter thick. And every one of those 5 little squares weighs exactly 160 milligrams each.
How likely is that? Because the pieces I gave you, Linda, were not all shaped the same. I gave you some circles, I think, some oblongs, and some squares.
That's right. The 5 squares are exactly perfect squares. And they exactly weigh 160 milligrams each, and they are machined. The edges of each one of those little squares, when they looked at, and this comes to your question, he used an scanning electron microscope, which is used with, the scanning electron microscope is used with the energy dispersive spectroscopy. Now, what this all means, these big words, is that they have the ability now with scanning electron microscopes to take something, let's say this is 6 millimeters wide, which is just a little bit over 1/4 of an inch. And they can go down to the surface, and they can keep going down and down. They get down to 1 to 2 microns. And to show you how small that is, if you could take and isolate a single blood cell out of your bloodstream, it would be about 7 microns in diameter, a blood cell. They're going down to 1 to 2 microns, which is about 1/3 the size of a blood cell, to take a look at things on these artifacts that you sent. And when they get to a place that they're interested in, or various places, they then can ratchet change into a particular kind of switch, which is the energy dispersive spectroscopy. And when you find out what you want to measure, and you're on a spot, this will determine exactly what elements are there. Well, when they did this on the 5 little squares, on the 2 ellipticals, which also were 6 millimeters wide.
Linda, I'm going to ask you to hold on for just a moment, if you would, and we'll be right back to you. We are at the half-hour mark, folks. Linda, are you there? Yes, I hear you. All right, so we were on the smaller pieces, and you said they weighed 160 grams each.
Yeah, the 5. And out of the 10 pieces that you sent, 8 of the 10 had a common denominator of each being 6 millimeters wide. So there were 5 that were perfectly square. There were 2 elliptical that were 6 millimeters by 8 millimeters, and the circle was 6 millimeters in diameter. So 6 millimeter seemed to be a constant, at least in some of these dimensions. Now, on the, we'll call it the very thin blade, it measured exactly 10 inches by 1.5 inches, which the scientists thought was unusual, that anything would end up in even inches, which is a terrestrial measurement. That could be that it was sawed off from something that's unknown. He thought that was strange that it should measure so exactly. And the last piece is the approximately 2 3/8 inches by 1 15/16 inches, not square, almost square. We'll call it the vent. It is this small, very, very thin object with very thin slits throughout it.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to have some other detailed remarks to make about the, we'll call it the blade and the vent. But first, I want to go to a sentence that is from the second communication that you now have out on the computer. And this is from the source who says, Granddad stated their own analysis. He's talking back in, that he came in possession of these in 1974 from his grandfather, who got them from the, I guess, the 1947 crash, is what he's alleging. Granddad stated their own analysis of the samples indicated it as pure extract aluminum as a conductor for the electromagnetic fields created in the propulsion system, unquote. And we'll stop there for a second. That sentence certainly seemed to hold up when they took the electron dispersive spectroscopy to every single one of the 10 pieces on several parts of them. Now, what they're doing in the EDS, you bombard with electrons, and it knocks out electrons, kind of punches out the electrons. And those electrons have a very characteristic wavelength. They put out an X-ray when they fly out, and that X-ray has a very characteristic wavelength. and then you can tell exactly what the element is.
Okay.
Well, over and over and over again in every one of these, it was, and this is the phrase that is correct to use, greater than 99% aluminum and could not detect any other element. Because scientists are reluctant to say that anything is 100% anything. Because even putting your fingerprints or brushing it on soil can add something which might be picked up at 0.01%, if you understand what I mean.
I do. Now, what does that mean? Now, for example, is there much terrestrial production done in pure aluminum, or is it usually for strength and alloy?
Usually when we're building with aluminum in something, we are putting and adding manganese or other alloys to strengthen. And tomorrow or Tuesday, this scientist is going to be meeting with a metallurgical professional to discuss exactly these issues of aluminum alloys and 100% alloy, and I hope that next Sunday I can have a further update on that. But I want to say that there's something else interesting that showed up in the scanning electron microscope, which gets into this question of whether or not there's anything that could be structural. It's certainly not an alloy, but what they found in one of the 5 little squares were silicon granules. They were 1 to 2 microns, and they seemed to be embedded in the surface of the aluminum, and on this square there were striations across it as if the little square had itself been either scratched or abraded by something, and it raised the speculation, which ranges from could these pieces have had impact with something that was sandy or dusty, or is there a processing mechanism in the manufacturing of these little pieces that somehow brought a silicon polishing dust to them? We're going to learn a little bit more about that from the metallurgist. And when you come to we'll call it the very thin blade, it was less than 1 millimeter, just extremely thin and light,
Yes.
10 inches long and 1.5 inches wide.
That's right.
On that and on what we're calling the little vent were granules that were different. These turned out to be 10% manganese, 10% iron, and 80% aluminum. I'm talking now only in little granules that seem to somehow be attached or also embedded. Now, what they are or what they mean or whether they are something that was picked up over time, the source said that he's had these since 1974, and they were tarnished, and they may have been exposed to other things. That part's hard to know. Well, a question still hanging is, even if they are all aluminum on the outside, could there be any structural detail on the inside? Well, tonight, just before we went on the air, the scientist called me. He was in the lab. He had, with your permission, Art, he had cut into one of the little 5 squares that
Yes.
we talked about.
Yes.
And he said it was pure silver, shiny, appeared to have no other structural details, and at this point it appears that though that at least is just aluminum, 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 aluminum. And as he said to me, in this universe, where as far as we look, when we look at all of the elements and we look at the stars and the galaxies, we keep seeing the same spectrums of the same elements. So if it is aluminum and aluminum and aluminum over and over and over again, what we do not know is function. We know we have aluminum on this planet. There must be aluminum throughout the universe and other places. But what are the function of these? And to this date, there is nothing about any of this that to the scientists or even some of the people he has worked with and they have discussed, there is nothing that even indicates any kind of function from these pieces at this point.
In other words, no earthly use they can discern.
Not at this point. And the other question comes back to this source's strange sentence about used as a conductor for the electromagnetic fields created in the propulsion system. Well, aluminum might conduct some electricity, but what would the relationship be specifically to an electromagnetic field? We're also going to talk with the metallurgist and some other people about that.
Answer is, of course, it's not magnetic. Aluminum is not magnetic.
That's right. So by next weekend, we may have a little bit more, at least professional information about some of these questions. But at this point, Art, there is nothing that we can say that would confirm or deny that they are in fact extraterrestrial, other dimensional, time travel, or anything. It's aluminum, aluminum, aluminum in shapes that appear to have definitely been machined. Could they have been machined on the Earth? I am assuming definitely in this day and age they could have been 1947. Could that be a source? We do not know, and all we've got to go by at this point are this man's two letters.
All right, and there's some chance that they impacted on something.
Well, it's speculation about the silicon granules in one of the 5 little squares. It could also be a manufacturing process, and these are the kinds of things that are very difficult for us to know beyond the fact that we've got these 2 letters from this man claiming that these are artifacts from a crash. Now, I think it's also important to point out that Jesse Marcel Jr., who saw some of this material at his father's, that his father brought home to the kitchen in 1947 July, described completely different types of material.
A type of crinkly thing that would regain its shape.
And he said, he told me in that interview that he never personally crinkled them up. His father told him that.
I see.
He never did it himself, but he said that he did handle the material. He saw for himself those fuchsia-colored symbols in these little 3/8 of an inch wide little beams that were so light and have been compared in other research to balsa wood, looking like sort of a silvery, coppery color, but being compared to balsa wood. Again, all of that is quite different from this aluminum, aluminum, aluminum. Who argue no. Professor Morrison feels strongly that it still is. I think Professor Steele in Australia does. And to some extent, it hardly matters because it's going to be coming in a year and passing through this part of the solar system anyway, and then it's going to be gone for a long time. But in terms of orbital calculations, they're still debating it all. So that's the most I know up to date.
Well, what bothers me is I think the earlier facts hit it on the head. They come with what they say is a firm figure, and then that changes significantly, and they say this is the new firm figure.
Well, because Jupiter, the Jupiter effect in this solar system, it can pull things in or have some other kinds of effect, and they have to get these things past Jupiter before they really, really can determine it finally. So that's what's been happening.
Well, I wish they'd said that before it passed Jupiter's effect. You know, it was as though they were saying, we know for sure that it's going to be 1 to 1.5 AU. Right. We guarantee that. And obviously that was not quite correct. I mean, so there you are.
Right.
First-time caller line, you're on the air with Linda Howe. Hello.
Hi. I was actually, I don't know if this is having to do with the topic in question right now, but I was wanting to ask Linda if she has had any information about non-humanoid, but nonetheless physical, non-earthly organisms. Like, you know, in other words, like an alien animal or something like that.
Interesting question.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and the only thing that really comes to mind are throughout the centuries there have been these constant reports of things like the strange all-black dogs or all-black cats that people have seen either seemingly disappear in thin air or have been associated where there have been a lot of strange animal deaths. These mysterious animals, are they something from another dimension? Are they associated with the UFO phenomenon? There seems to be some eyewitness links on the Bigfoot, for example, that the Bigfoot creature has been seen actually right next to silver discs with blonde-haired humanoids. There are several accounts like that, seemingly linking the Bigfoot to this UFO phenomenon in a very physical way. And the Bigfoot has also been very commonly described in the 1970s, especially in pastures and in fields where mutilated animals were found. It doesn't mean that somebody saw a Bigfoot mutilate animals. It means there's been an association, and in some of the abduction literature, people caught up in the abduction syndrome have said that they have the impression that the Bigfoot primate type of creature that disappears in flashes of light is some kind of a biological android, like a robot, but certainly all biological, that is doing work on this planet for something else of an advanced intelligence.
Well, I hope you will follow up on the Bigfoot samples. And the reason I say that, Linda, is because a lot of times we get these very exciting reports about a sample or a photograph that is undeniable or something or another, and then you never hear anything else about it. It drives me crazy.
Right. It's hard to keep up with everything.
I know. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Linda Howe. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, where are you?
I'm in Quincy, California.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'd like to tell her about this interesting thing that about 3 years ago, I guess it was, up in Montana, the northwestern side of Montana, up around Glacier Park. My nieces were driving home, and they saw out in the field around Kalispell area, which is just outside of Glacier Park, a bright light, and the bright light moved in a westerly direction. And they heard this rumbling sound with it. It was kind of like, when you go down the road with the windows open.
Right.
And this bright light was sitting there, just moving in the westerly direction, and it just continued to move. And people around that block saw this or heard the noise. They didn't see the light, but they heard the noise in their house, and my nieces went running in the house, real fast. They were just terrified. And it took them about, 3 or 4 hours to calm down. And my sister said that, she said that the dogs were barking, and, this weird sound was just really, all over the house. And then all of a sudden the bright light left them alone, and, it just went on.
All right, thank you very much. There's another one. I have no idea what to do with stories like that.
Animal reactions are so fascinating because in a lot of these cases around lights, sometimes dogs will go crazy. There was a case in Colorado where the people on the inside of the house east of Colorado Springs were not aware of anything until 2 large Labrador dogs literally attacked the wall next to the door, left great big claw marks, were barking. The people were totally disoriented about what could possibly be happening. When they opened up the door, outside was this gigantic round light above their house. Now, when people have aggressive animals like that, the larger majority seem to have animals that go the other way, that put their tails between their legs and cower under furniture, cower under beds, just simply don't respond the way you would think.
I had a golden retriever. It used to go to the bathtub. It was actually embarrassing. All right, hold on, and I'll be right back to you. Whenever there'd be a bang or a noise, this golden retriever of mine, which I very much loved, named Cobber, would take off like a bandit and be centered in the bathtub, and you couldn't get that dog to move for a long time. We'll be right back.
We all know the secret to making money is timing. Now is the right time to call what could be the most profitable telephone number you call this year. Vice President Albert Gore said, quote, "Make no mistake about it. The telecommunications industry is by all odds the most important, lucrative marketplace of the 21st century," end quote. Act now. Discover how a minimum $8,200 participation in the explosive telecommunications industry could return to you $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 or more, plus a yearly income for the rest of your life. And yes, it can be part of your IRA or retirement plan. For complete details and a free video cassette, call toll-free 1-800-444-1049. Operators are ready 24 hours a day. Ensure your financial future. Take action now. Call 1-800-444-1049. That's Microtech at 1-800-444-1049. You've heard our GMX ads for about 1.5 years now, so what are you waiting for? GMX is the way to treat your hard water problems, and without salt. Not only can you eliminate dealing with salt, you can also forget maintenance, extra electricity bills, or other hidden ongoing costs. Aren't you tired of hard water scaling? That ugly white stuff around your faucets, causing toilet bowl ring and clogging the shower head, not to mention the water heater. GMX will take care of all that once and for all. How can you go wrong? In most homes, the GMX water conditioner pays for itself in 2 years or less, especially after your water heater throws off its hard water scaling and becomes more efficient. It will happen, folks. And then you continue to save money for years and years. The GMX units never wear out for about a $600 investment with an unconditional 90-day money-back guarantee. You can try out the GMX water conditioner and see for yourself. Give them a call at 1-800-4060-GMX. That's 1-800-4060-GMX.
Okay, with that, back now to Linda Howe. Linda, are you there?
I am here.
Good. All right, we've got time for a couple more. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Linda Howe. Where are you calling from, please? I guess we missed him. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello?
This is Dan from San Diego. Am I on?
Hello?
This is Dan from San Diego. Am I on?
Yes, you're on. Turn your radio off, Dan.
Okay. All right. Hey, I've been trying to get through to you for months.
All right, well, you've made it.
All right, great, Peter. Hey, I was thinking, Wiseback?
Yes.
He's an associate of yours, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I was talking to him this morning, and I wanted to ask you a question because you didn't really give me an answer. I wanted to know if, do you think Howard Stern's Miss America book should be translated into Spanish, or would it lose its cultural impact? I'm sort of a linguistic.
Oh, no, I think Chinese, sir. Thank you. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Linda Howe. Hello.
Yes, this is Tom.
Hi, Tom. Where are you?
I'm in Geneva, Ohio.
Yes, sir.
I had an experience where I was in church, and I saw this, like, a gray alien creature. I came face-to-face with him, and he, I wrote Linda about this, and she never got back with me for some reason. Maybe she was too busy, but...
It's hard to keep up with all correspondence, and I apologize, but I do my best.
Well, I figured you was probably busy, overwhelmed or something, but he sort of, like, gave me the this power to see into the future. I know it sounds crazy. But he gave me this power to see, like, an hour or two into the future, and I witnessed this lady get up in the first row of the church, and she put on a pink raincoat and went outside, and it started to rain. And right after church, the exact same thing that I saw happened. And this was like a gray creature, and he had, like, yellow cat eyes. And
Okay, now what you're saying is that you had the impression of this being in your mind's eye, or you thought you were...
I really couldn't tell.
Well,
I mean, to me, the creature looked absolutely real.
Yeah, well, there have been stories of people being in church who say that they have seen either the kind of being you're describing, or they have seen tall beings with long hair, or they have seen beings with flowing robes. What it is about the process of going to church?
I think I know.
Okay, go, Art.
I think that when people go to church, they're concentrating on spiritual matters. They're actually closing the rest of the world out for a period of time and allowing themselves to feel spiritual.
Right.
And so I think it follows that with that kind of...
kind of the paradigm they're in.
Well, yeah, I guess paradigm's a fair word, a little overused, but fair. They're just in that mode, and so they're open to these kinds of things. That's just my best guess.
Well, none of us really know, but there have been repeated patterns of stories like this gentleman's as far as, they seem incredible to people, even those that experience it, but they are reported many times, so it isn't just a single event.
Exactly. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Linda Howe. Hello.
Hi, Linda and Art.
Yes, sir.
Linda, I heard you talking about a biological machine earlier tonight.
Android.
Oh, a droid, yeah. And you know what? When I was a very small kid, I seen one of those things. I saw it 2 different times.
Which type?
It looked like a machine, but the eyes, they were real. The eyes were real.
Well, my illusion was to the fact that abductees and so-called insiders in the government talk about the fact that the grays that interact with humans, for the most part, are not the primary intelligence, but that are in fact programmed biological androids made specifically to do work here, and the work can vary all over the place. And that raises an even bigger question. What is the intelligence behind the gray phenomena on the Earth?
And that might even be borne out by the Santilli autopsies, because it was mush inside that creature, save the crystal object removed. It didn't look like it should look. Of course, what should it look like, I have no idea, but I mean, it almost seemed like biological soup.
Well, if it is, let's just say for a second that crystal was some kind of a power source for a biological android, and that the Santilli creatures are in fact cloned biological androids made to do a specific kind of work. We don't know how far this goes in terms of all kinds of cloned beings to do work for something else that's very advanced. That's a distinct possibility.
Possibly one more. West of the Rockies for Linda Howe, you're on the air.
Okay.
Where are you calling from, sir?
Missoula, Montana.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. I have to relate a story that happened to me in 1976.
It's got to be quick.
Okay. It was in Plains, Kansas, and it was 2:30 in the morning, or 3 o'clock. A friend and myself were fishing, and they were doing experimental B-52 flying over, bombers, and they had boxes out in the cornfields and stuff, and that had happened for days. And one night we were out in the field fishing, and this object flew over with bright light, and it made just a straight line, and there was no noise.
All right, well, thank you. There's yet one more. You could take reports like that from now until doomsday, and by the way, I think we will. And one of these days, Linda, we've got to nail it down.
Well, at least I'm trying to concentrate on physical hard evidence, and tonight we didn't even go into all the pathology and medical and hard physical facts that we're finding in crop circles and animal mutilations and soil and other things. And on Dreamland over the next few months, that's what I will continue to try to concentrate on, the harder fact aspect.
All right. Well, I appreciate your contribution, and especially done at the last minute like that. Linda, bless your heart. Thank you.
Well, it's been fun, Art, and I'll look forward to more updates next Sunday.
Good night, Linda.
Good night.
See you next Sunday. That's Linda Howe, our faithful investigator for Dreamland. I'm Art Bell from the high desert near Dreamland. Good night. This has been Dreamland, a program dedicated to an examination of areas in the human experience not easily nor neatly put in a box. Things seen at the edge of vision, awakening a part of the mind as yet not mapped. Yet things every bit as real as the air we breathe but don't see. Please join us again next week at this time for Dreamland. Welcome to Dreamland, a program dedicated to an examination of areas in the human experience not easily nor neatly put in a box. Things seen at the edge of vision, awakening a part of the mind as yet not mapped, and yet things every bit as real as the air we breathe but don't see. This is Dreamland. Another Sunday, another Dreamland. Good evening, everybody. If you want an update on what occurred over the northwest part of the U.S. on Friday night, whoa, what a show that was. Linda Moulton Howe has that coming up in her report in a moment, followed by
a very, very unusual interview. A man who made a lot of money in the commodities trading markets in Chicago, Mark Ritchie, and then spent a lot of it going to the rainforest, has written a book called Spirit of the Rainforest. Oh my, what an interview that's going to be. Spent a lot of time with a rainforest shaman. We'll talk about that tonight and much more on Dreamland. I'm Art Bell, and so we'll get to it shortly. First, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, it is the Emmy Award-winning documentary producer, Linda Moulton Howe, investigator into crop circles, animal mutilations, general scientific reporter, and regular feature on Dreamland from Philadelphia. Here is Linda Moulton Howe. Hi, Linda.
Well, hi, Art. And following up your Friday marathon, as the whole country knows by now, that Friday evening, November 14th, between 9:12 and 9:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, hundreds of residents in Washington and Oregon reported seeing a huge flash of light followed by what some compared to a 4th of July fireworks explosion. And in fact, there were eyewitness reports in Canada as well. Some people even captured the event on videotape, and the bright objects have been shown on TV news yesterday and today in Canada and the United States. Police, fire, and sheriff's offices were contacted for an explanation, and here's an example of one sheriff's dispatcher response.
All right.
Right. We did get calls, and we were advised it was a meteor shower.
But one man who disagreed with the meteor explanation should know. He was an eyewitness to the entire event and is president of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, based in Vancouver, BC. Ken Henriksen estimates he has spent 400 hours sky-gazing and told me...
Yeah, but it was 100%. It was not a meteor storm.
100% that it wasn't a meteor storm.
Yeah, there was no way that it was a meteor storm.
What were you doing that caused you to be able to see this?
Oh, it's a beautiful night. I was out walking my dog, of all things, and I had walked away from it. I was behind a building from it, and whatever reason, the dog didn't come, so I turned around to go get him, and I looked up, and it just flashed and appeared, and then just shot straight down towards the horizon. And then it traveled about halfway down the sky, almost in a straight line down, very slowly, and then broke up about halfway.
How many pieces?
36.
36 pieces. You could count them.
Well, it was 45 seconds. It was a long time.
So you were able to watch this for 45?
Oh, it was stunning. It was stunning. It took 30 seconds before it broke. So it was a total just over a minute and a quarter.
And you watched that whole thing, and the color was?
It was white, and it left, I don't even know how to describe it, just streamers of almost like diamond dust on black felt.
And from your point of view, as president of the Astronomical Society in Vancouver, why was this not a meteor shower?
Well, one is it came in as a solid body that broke up. And I've seen bolides before, big, bright bolides. This was close. This was very close. And it just didn't have that characteristic look to it. And it was traveling much too slow. Like I said, the first half took maybe 30 seconds. And the second half took about 45 seconds from the point it started to break up. It was actually decelerating as it was breaking up. There's no way that would have been a bolide. It would have been coming. To get that far into the atmosphere, it would have been coming pretty fast. Wouldn't have lasted more than 3 to 10 seconds.
And what you saw with your own eyes lasted about 45 seconds falling down from the sky.
Yeah, the first 30 degrees of it, the first half of it before it broke up was about 20 to 30 seconds. And then about halfway down the sky in the north, that's when it started to break up. And after the breakup, it was another 45 seconds before it made landfall.
In the Vancouver area?
In the Vancouver area. It missed the city by about 50 kilometers, I'd say.
But it wouldn't have gotten all the way to the Idaho border?
No, this was north of Vancouver.
Right, and there...
Yeah, but you would have seen it for 500 miles south.
Well, there are some confusing reports of red objects in formation.
They saw close enough to the horizon, just the atmospheric diffraction, meaning that the air moving and the water inside the air would have been lensing the light, so you would have been getting reds and blues and all kinds of strange colors.
Those red objects in formation that I mentioned to the astronomer came from a report that Peter Davenport at the UFO Reporting Center in Seattle received from Tonasket, Washington, in the Okinawa National Forest. Tonasket is almost in the center of Washington and not far from the Canadian border, east and a little south of Vancouver, not north, as the astronomer saw the debris falling. Perhaps the object seen through the lower atmosphere might have looked red to witnesses in Tonasket, or possibly there was something else moving in the sky further east. Here's what the Okanagan County Sheriff's dispatcher told me when I called.
That it appeared to be, well, matter of fact, I'll read you what I have.
Thank you.
Unidentified red lights flying in a formation through the county in a northward direction. That's it.
And you're reading from what?
I'm reading from our main file list.
And how many people called in with that description?
I don't have that precise information.
But more than half a dozen?
Somewhere right at that number.
And the color was definitely described as red.
It says red.
I also called the North American Airspace Defense Command, known as NORAD, that works with the U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Their job is to monitor, track, and catalog over 8,000 man-made objects orbiting Earth, ranging from satellites to rocket launch debris. Scott Johnson in the Public Affairs Office told me NORAD had tracked what exploded over Vancouver.
An SL-12 Russian rocket body. The launch was conducted on the 12th of November. This is the spent rocket body that comes off the booster. And it orbits for a while, for a few days, and it came back in and burned up.
Was NORAD tracking this Russian...
Oh, yes. We monitor and track and catalog over 8,000 man-made objects in space.
And how long had you been monitoring, waiting for it to come down?
Well, a couple of days. We didn't know exactly when it was going to come in, of course. But, like I say, that happens so quickly sometimes. It depends on the drag coefficients and all the other things.
And what was like the nature of what people said?
Well, that's basically a bright object coming in and then breaking into many pieces over the city of Vancouver. Now, Seattle, of course, saw it from a distance to the north. But primarily, most of the calls have come from Vancouver.
And you never got any calls further east?
No calls further east. Only calls from Seattle, Vancouver, British Columbia, and Victoria, British Columbia, which is an island right off the coast there, next to Vancouver.
And NORAD tracked the Russian object down to that point?
That's correct, yes.
And anything that went further east is a question mark?
It's a question mark.
I had told Officer Johnson about the Tonasket reports, and he was puzzled. So was Marty Kellogg in Sandpoint, Idaho, around 9:15 p.m. Friday, about the same time that the Russian rocket fell apart. She was driving with her young son when they saw 7 glowing white lights in the sky, not moving at all. Marty Kellogg.
This wasn't something far away that was moving. It could have been an airplane. They were these huge lights in the sky, stationary, not moving.
Were they in a line or?
Yes, there was a definite formation. There were 4 on the top in a straight line, and if you draw 4 straight circles in a straight line, you have 3 spaces between those circles. Mm-hmm. And the bottom were 3, and they were in those spaces.
So it was like a formation of 4 on top and 3 below, all in a line.
You have these 7 bright lights, and every time I describe it, I hold my hands up, and I hold them up in a circle that's about the size of a large coffee cup saucer. And the one of them, the one on the bottom, the most forward or the most north, had 3 lights coming out of the middle band of it. 1 light was blue, 1 light was red, 1 light was green. And the light that was coming out of it was kind of like a translucent light. You saw a definite color. You know, him and I talked about the color real quickly. But it wasn't like a solid light. It was kind of like putting a drop of food coloring in a glass of water. That sort of translucent color. Mm-hmm. All the others were just solid globes, except the most southern one on the top was about a third larger than all the others, and it had a tail of light coming out of the top. We looked at it, we talked for a few minutes, and then they were gone.
Well, how did they go?
They were just gone.
Well,
there was no movement. They didn't disappear. They didn't go to the right, go to the left, zoom off. They were gone. It's like if you had 7 lights in the sky and you took a switch and you turned off the lights. Instantaneously, the tail, everything instantaneously was gone.
About that same time, back west toward Vancouver, in Abbotsford, British Columbia, apparently pieces of the Russian rocket were falling to the ground. The John and Pat Kramer family even heard and felt huge booms.
It sounded like almost fireworks, except they were quite a bit stronger. Like it impacted the walls a little bit more. The percussion. So it was fairly strong, and there were about maybe 4, 5, or 6 booms. And I was just actually talking to my daughter since that phone call, and she saw them in the sky. And we actually the TV stations here showed them. They looked like streaks of light with bright spots and sort of like almost like fireworks.
Abbotsford, I just called the Abbotsford police for you to see if the police. They said that their phones were ringing off the hooks because there was so much shuddering. Like, we not only saw it, we felt it. But that they do not have any reports of debris in the fields. However, in the Vancouver Sun, it says debris fell in Burnaby, British Columbia, which is a suburb of Vancouver, and Abbotsford and the ocean.
So, Art, I think that what has occurred here on Friday was more than one event.
Listen, Linda.
Yeah.
Let's go back to what the NORAD fellow said for a second. He said, if I heard it correctly, essentially what NORAD said on Friday, and that is that they would have seen it in Seattle, perhaps Vancouver,
and
but
Victoria.
anything further east of that, they would be unable to account for, and they're still claiming this went down essentially in the Pacific.
Well, the astronomer said that this should have been seen for 500 miles at the top where he saw it begin and maybe the explosion. So it might explain some of the reports. Clearly, if there are booms and shudders in Abbotsford, Burnaby, in that area, it means that some of this did fall in Canada. And this is exactly consistent with the astronomer. He said that there would be landfall from these objects.
All right. I talked, that's the astronomer. Now, I talked to, I can't tell you how many people Friday night from Seattle, including the news director of KOMO, who said, hey, look, this thing did not land in the ocean. I stood here and watched it pass from west to east over my head and continue east. I talked to people as far east as eastern Washington, who said they saw it going over their heads.
Right, and the Vancouver Sun clearly has had somebody report that they have had material fall just exactly like the Kramers heard these booms. And I'm curious if anyone listening knows of, has any debris that has fallen. If they could contact you and me, I'd sure like to know about this. And my fax number is area code 215-491-9842. That's area code 215-491-9842. And my mailing address is Post Office Box 300 in Jameson, Pennsylvania. Zip code 18929. That's Post Office Box 300 in Jameson, PA. Zip code 18929. And I want to, Art, also thank you and Peter Davenport in the UFO Reporting Center for contacting me on the Tenasket, the Abbotsford, and those Sandpoint people, because it's especially noteworthy to realize that Idaho is an entirely another state further east, and whatever Marty Kellogg and her son watched, she said, for at least 5 to 10 minutes, and raising her hands up and saying that to her they would have been the size of coffee cup saucers, 7 of them stuck still in the air from somewhere 5 to 7 to 10 minutes. We are not talking about what happened over Victoria, And I would encourage anybody listening who also saw other objects further east in Washington, east in Oregon, Idaho, if they would contact me. I got a fax on Friday myself from a man in Wyoming who had seen a very bright, startlingly bright object that evening. Whether or not all of these things are connected, there certainly were more than one event occurring on Friday, November 14th.
Well, then, in many ways, this is memorable of the Phoenix incident because, on the one hand, a lot of people tried to explain that, you'll recall, as flares. In this case, an SL-12.
Well, you know,
however, in both cases, we've got firm sightings, many, that occurred elsewhere, apparently simultaneously.
Right, but I do think that we do have this Russian launch on November 12th that NORAD was tracking and that they knew it was about to come down, this debris piece, and the astronomer who actually watched this entire event with a lot of stargazing experience and knowledge said his first reaction was, my God, the mirror is finally coming down, because he emphasized it was so slow that it was consistent with something very low in Earth orbit, that when it does begin to hit the friction of the atmosphere, it's moving slowly, it can break up spectacularly, but you don't have the speed that you have with bolides.
Absolutely fascinating. I mean, truly fascinating, the whole thing. Linda, we're out of time. So if you have more, I can hold you briefly. If not, we should terminate now.
No, there are two really important stories that I'll hold for next week.
They really are important. I know what they are. I'm not going to tell.
Okay.
All right, Linda, thank you very much. That's Linda Moulton Howe from Philadelphia, and I don't know if that helps you put together what happened Friday, but it's got a lot of people still scratching their heads. I'm Art Bell, and this is Dreamland. Well, it's as good as any other explanation you can come up with, and there are many.
And we know, Art, that there have been these stories since the 40s of silver discs with non-human beings being found in New Mexico and other places. And you got that. You've now had one correspondence that you have put out. You've gotten another. I don't know if you are going to distribute that publicly, but it comes down to the fact that somebody says that they have had pieces of artifacts from a crash. In the letter it says Roswell. We don't know where. There's no specific coordinates.
All right, if I might, let me stop you and tell everybody the second letter, the one Linda is now referring to with regard to the Roswell pieces, is now on the Internet. It's under anonymous letters. You see first the photographs of the material, then the first letter, and now the second letter has been added to it as of this moment on my webpage.
Okay.
Linda, if you would, start out.
Yeah.
You've been a middle person for me, and I really want to thank you, because getting something like this is actually kind of a burden.
It is very difficult, Art, because you now are experiencing what for the last 16 years trying to find anybody with very credible professional credentials who would be willing to look at physical tissue and samples in the unusual animal deaths was difficult, and now having to deal with artifacts that may have come from a craft from someplace else is also difficult, and we are still experiencing the same syndrome that these professionals ask for and must remain anonymous in order to protect their positions in their work.
All right. How much can you tell us about the scientist? He's well credentialed, who examined this possible wreckage.
Yes, and he is in a major Midwestern university. He has been helping me and several other investigators in several aspects of the phenomena for about 7 years. His work is extremely good, well done. And he has been looking at the alleged Roswell UFO crash artifacts that you received last month.
All right, can you, before we get to that, tell us what kind of tests were done on the material?
Yes. You gave him 10 pieces, and the 10 pieces broke down into 5 small, that turn out to be, this is very interesting, they are perfect squares. They've been measured, and they are exactly 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters square and less than 1 millimeter thick. And every one of those 5 little squares weighs exactly 160 milligrams each.
How likely is that? Because the pieces I gave you, Linda, were not all shaped the same. I gave you some circles, I think, some oblongs, and some squares.
That's right. The 5 squares are exactly perfect squares. And they exactly weigh 160 milligrams each, and they are machined. The edges of each one of those little squares, when they looked at, and this comes to your question, he used an scanning electron microscope, which is used with, the scanning electron microscope is used with the energy dispersive spectroscopy. Now, what this all means, these big words, is that they have the ability now, with scanning electron microscope, to take something, let's say this is 6 millimeters wide, which is just a little bit over 1/4 of an inch, and they can go down to the surface, and they can keep going down and down. They get down to 1 to 2 microns, and to show you how small that is, if you could take and isolate a single blood cell out of your bloodstream, it would be about 7 microns in diameter, a blood cell. They're going down to 1 to 2 microns, which is about 1/3 the size of a blood cell, to take a look at things on these artifacts that you sent. And when they get to a place that they're interested in, or various places, they then can ratchet change into a particular kind of switch, which is the energy dispersive spectroscopy. And when you find out what you want to measure, and you're on a spot, this will determine exactly what elements are there. Well, when they did this on the 5 little squares, on the 2 ellipticals, which also were 6 millimeters wide.
And I'm going to ask you to hold on for just a moment, if you would, and we'll be right back to you. We are at the half-hour mark, folks. Linda, are you there? Yes, I hear you. All right, so we were on the smaller pieces, and you said they weighed 160 grams each.
Yeah, the 5. And out of the 10 pieces that you sent, 8 of the 10 had a common denominator of each being 6 millimeters wide. So there were 5 that were perfectly square. There were 2 elliptical that were 6 millimeters by 8 millimeters, and the circle was 6 millimeters in diameter. So 6 millimeter seemed to be a constant, at least in some of these dimensions. Now on the, we'll call it the very thin blade, it measured exactly 10 inches by 1.5 inches, which the scientists thought was unusual, that anything would end up in even inches, which is a terrestrial measurement. That could be that it was sawed off from something that's unknown. He thought that was strange that it should measure so exactly. And the last piece is the approximately 2 3/8 inches by 1 15/16 inches, not square, almost square. We'll call it the vent. It is this small, very, very thin object with very thin slits throughout it.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to have some other detailed remarks to make about we'll call it the blade and the vent. But first, I want to go to a sentence that is from the second communication that you now have out on the computer. And this is from the source who says, Granddad stated their own analysis. He's talking back in, that he came in possession of these in 1974 from his grandfather, who got them from the, I guess, the 1947 crash, is what he's alleging. Granddad stated their own analysis of the samples indicated it as pure extract aluminum as a conductor for the electromagnetic fields created in the propulsion system, unquote. And we'll stop there for a second. That sentence certainly seemed to hold up. They took
the electron dispersive spectroscopy to every single one of the 10 pieces on several parts of them. Now, what they're doing in the EDS, you bombard with electrons, and it knocks out electrons, kind of punches out the electrons. And those electrons have a very characteristic wavelength. They put out an X-ray when they fly out, and that X-ray has a very characteristic wavelength, and then you can tell exactly what the element is.
Okay.
Well, over and over and over again in every one of these, it was, and this is the phrase that is correct to use, greater than 99% aluminum and could not detect any other element. Because scientists are reluctant to say that anything is 100% anything. Because even putting your fingerprint or brushing it on soil can add something that might be picked up at 0.01%, if you understand what I mean.
I do. Now, what does that mean? Now, for example, is there much terrestrial production done in pure aluminum, or is it usually for strength and alloy?
Usually when we're building with aluminum in something, we are adding manganese or other alloys to strengthen. And tomorrow or Tuesday, this scientist is going to be meeting with a metallurgical professional to discuss exactly these issues of aluminum alloys and 100% alloy, and I hope that next Sunday I can have a further update on that. But I want to say that there's something else interesting that showed up in the scanning electron microscope, which gets into this question of whether or not there's anything that could be structural. It's certainly not an alloy, but what they found in one of the 5 little squares were silicon granules. They were 1 to 2 microns, and they seemed to be embedded in the surface of the aluminum, and on this square there were striations across it as if the little square had itself been either scratched or abraded by something. And it raised the speculation, which ranges from, could these pieces have had impact with something that was sandy or dusty, or is there a processing mechanism in the manufacturing of these little pieces that somehow brought a silicon polishing dust to them? We're going to learn a little bit more about that from the metallurgist. And when you come to we'll call it the very thin blade, it was less than 1 millimeter, just extremely thin and light, just 10 inches long and 1.5 inches wide.
That's right.
On that, and on what we're calling the little vent, were granules that were different. These turned out to be 10% manganese, 10% iron, and 80% aluminum. I'm talking now only in little granules. It seems to somehow be attached or also embedded. Now, what they are or what they mean or whether they are something that was picked up over time, the source said that he's had these since 1974, and they were tarnished, and they may have been exposed to other things. That part's hard to know. Well, a question still hanging is, even if they are all aluminum on the outside, could there be any structural detail on the inside? Well, tonight, just before we went on the air, the scientist called me. He was in the lab. He had, with your permission, Art, he had cut into one of the little 5 squares that we talked about.
Yes.
And he said it was pure silver, shiny, appeared to have no other structural details, and at this point it appears that that at least is just aluminum, 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 aluminum. And as he said to me, in this universe, where as far as we look, when we look at all of the elements and we look at the stars and the galaxies, we keep seeing the same spectrums of the same elements. So if it is aluminum and aluminum and aluminum over and over and over again, what we do not know is function. We know we have aluminum on this planet. There must be aluminum throughout the universe and other places. But what are the function of these? And to this date, there is nothing about any of this that to the scientists or even some of the people he has worked with and they have discussed, there is nothing that even indicates any kind of function from these pieces at this point.
In other words, no earthly use they can discern.
Not at this point. And the other question comes back to this forces strange sentence about used as a conductor for the electromagnetic fields created in the propulsion system. Well, aluminum might conduct some electricity, but what would the relationship be specifically to an electromagnetic field? We're also going to talk with the metallurgists and some other people about that.
The answer is, of course, it's not magnetic. Aluminum is not magnetic.
That's right. So by next weekend, we may have a little bit more, at least professional information about some of these questions. But at this point, Art, there is nothing that we can say that would confirm or deny that they are in fact extraterrestrial, other dimensional, time travel, or anything. It's aluminum, aluminum, aluminum in shapes that appear to have definitely been machined. Could they have been machined on the Earth? I am assuming definitely in this day and age they could have been 1947. Could that be a source? We do not know, and all we've got to go by at this point are this man's two letters.
All right, and there's some chance that they impacted on something.
Well, it's speculation about the silicon granules in one of the 5 little squares. It could also be a manufacturing process, and these are the kinds of things that are very difficult for us to know beyond the fact that we've got these 2 letters from this man claiming that these are artifacts from a crash. Now, I think it's also important to point out that Jesse Marcel Jr., who saw some of this material at his father's, that his father brought home to the kitchen in 1947 July, described completely different types of material.
A type of crinkly thing that would regain its shape.
And he said, he told me in that interview that he never personally crinkled them up. His father told him that. He never did it himself, but he said that he did handle the material. He saw for himself those fuchsia-colored symbols in these little 3/8 of an inch wide little beams that were so light and have been compared in other research to balsa wood, looking like sort of a silvery, coppery color, but being compared to balsa wood. Again, all of that is quite different from this aluminum, aluminum, aluminum. Okay, so round 2. One of the faxes that I received was from Mr. Edward Stork of Denver, Pennsylvania, who has studied on his own a lot about metallurgy, and he called me to say that a piece of 99% pure aluminum, exactly 6 millimeters by 6 millimeters by 1 millimeter, would have to weigh 97 milligrams, not the 160 milligrams that the university scientists found for each of the 5 little squares.
Now, they did spectrography, they did the electron scanning microscope and all the rest on the little piece on the outside of it and found nothing but, as you said, aluminum, aluminum, aluminum.
Right.
And so that should weigh
97.
And instead...
I went back to the scientist and I said, here's the situation, and he went back to the lab, he checked the calibration on his scale, and he remeasured each of the little squares, and the answers were the same. But he also did a calculation and said, yes, that it was true. If the little squares are 99% pure aluminum at 6 by 6 by 1 millimeters, they really should weigh 97 milligrams, not 160 milligrams. So now we have a weight discrepancy to solve. Well, another factor said that he had worked in an aluminum die cast plant and proposed that all the pieces are sample molds used to determine material content. He said that the grooves in the round piece that resembles a phonograph record are created by the metal lathe used to smooth the surface to be tested. This is a quote from his fax. The squares, oblong, and round fragments are punch-outs that are material that is removed from the castings to make openings for mechanical connections, unquote, and therefore they are scrap material and thrown away. Well, I spent a lot of time the past few days talking with metallurgists, including 2 who worked with aluminum almost exclusively at Sandia Labs in Albuquerque from the early 1950s until they retired a few years ago.
Both suggested that if so far the scientific analysis of the electronic dispersive spectroscopy showed only aluminum atoms on the surface of the object, because remember, Art, at first you wanted to keep them all intact, so the first round of testing was really only on the surface of the object.
Right.
When he punched through a little bit on one Sunday just before the program, that was not with the EDS testing. Well, the logical conclusion is, according to these men, that there is a coating of aluminum around another different metal on the inside, which can be a way to manufacture aluminum alloys, because aluminum is non-corrosive and might be used as a coating. Now, this is what a retired Sandia laboratory metallurgist, Charlie Mack, had to say about why the EDS might have picked up only aluminum and whether or not the pieces could be scrap punch-outs.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the aluminum was fairly thick, the coating of aluminum on the outside,
right,
you would burn through that and hit the inside as well.
Right, like an M&M, like a coated M&M candy.
Yeah.
And aluminum might be the outside and something on the inside. Whatever is coated is deeper inside these squares than the EDS is penetrating.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And that's why it's hard to get on the inside. They're going to cut through a whole piece.
Right.
Would it make sense to you, from all of your experience, that there could be 5 punch-outs that were scrap material from alloy production that would each weigh exactly 160 milligrams?
The means by which it was punched, the tooling would have to be in order to come up with the same volume of material punched out, which of course is kind of unusual.
Okay.
It's kind of peculiar that they would all be that way. If it was that way, they were all punched out.
So it is not normal for scrap aluminum punch-out material that's thrown away to end up looking identical, being exactly the same size, and weighing exactly the same size.
Right.
So, Art, maybe the mystery about the weight discrepancy will be explained if we find there is an aluminum coating around a denser internal metal. Those tests will be done in the last week of May, and I'll be able to report back on the Memorial Day weekend, Dreamland. Finding a coated alloy does not mean the fragments are from an extraterrestrial craft either. Pure aluminum does not exist naturally because the element is so reactive with other elements that all 99% pure aluminum has been processed by someone somewhere. Aluminum does not corrode, so using it as a metal coating is part of our 20th century industrial technology. And if it works here, maybe it's used to build round discs that travel through time and space somewhere else too.
Well, it's a real mystery now. In other words, all of this careful testing on the outside picked up nothing else except what I recall you to say was a little bit of virtual sand.
They found 1 or 2 micron silicon fragments, and I have confirmed that silicon is used in the aluminum manufacturing process. It's used, it can be used as an alloy, and it can also be used as a flux to clean out equipment where they are working with aluminum alloys. So that could explain why there are those small sand dust pieces. There were some slightly different percentages on the vent, what we call the vent, and that's the long scrap. It had some other mixtures which also could have come from the dust of work with an alloy. And maybe in the final result, we will have an alloy that might be some company's sophisticated punch-out scrap, and then that would mean that whoever sent these letters and sent these pieces was perhaps trying to run us off in a red herring, or it could end up being another anomaly that we have
study, but we could never prove its origins like so many other puzzles in UFO phenomena.
All right, the big headline is, it really can't be aluminum. Not at this weight.
No, with the weight discrepancy, there's got to be something else there.
Fascinating.
It is.
And they cut it open. They cut one of the squares open, and they found nothing but a shiny, apparent aluminum interior as well.
So far, but they haven't put it under the EDS, and that will happen in that last week of May.
All right, and if they find nothing but aluminum, then we've really got a problem, don't we?
Well, it would almost be a physical impossibility as I understand the physics of the universe at this point, because if it weighs 160 milligrams,
there has to be more there.
There has to be something else there adding that weight.
All right, and so it is, folks. The mystery of the day. Linda, we'll get your information out. We're out of time.
Okay.
Bless your heart. I'll look forward to next week's report.
Okay.
And stay away from the chupacabras. Thank you, and good night, Linda. Coming up next.